Dan Giusti is the former head chef of the 2 Michelin-starred fine dining restaurant Noma in Copenhagen. Today, he works with chefs and schools as a founder of Brigade, an organization focused on improving the U.S. school lunch system through scratch cooking. Brigade partners with schools to create vibrant meals that are nutritious and familiar, but can expose them to new flavors and ingredients. The beauty of Brigade is that it's made up of professional chefs who can apply their expertise and skills to help create menus and train local food service workers on how to cook the items from scratch. Over the last month, Brigade's focus has drastically changed as hundreds of millions of Americans have had their lives upended by the COVID-19 pandemic. School closures across the country have abruptly halted the flow of cafeteria meals to millions of low-income students.
During the year, we're feeding kids, and we know there are a lot of kids in need. And now that school is not in session, those kids that are in need are really reliant on these meals.
In response, Brigade is utilizing its partnerships with school districts in suburban and urban areas throughout New York, Connecticut, and Virginia to provide thousands of grab-and-go meals that parents can pick up for their children outside the walls of school cafeterias.
Balancing this idea of making the best meal possible, feeding as many people as possible, but doing it with as few people, as few workers as possible. So this is kind of, I would say, at the forefront of our focus at the moment. And I would imagine anyone out there who's kind of in the business of feeding people at the moment, whether it be in a school or elsewhere, is kind of in the same boat trying to figure this out.
The task at hand has gotten increasingly difficult as the number of financially unstable families has increased dramatically in recent weeks. Millions of Americans are suddenly out of work due to this pandemic and are now reliant on free school meals to help feed their kids.
Therefore, the amount of meals that need to get produced have increased dramatically, and we're seeing that they continue to increase. And this is actually interesting because typically, for example, what we're doing now very much mirrors what happens during the summertime. We're feeding people at various sites, not necessarily schools. People show up and get those meals, not necessarily kids from a specific school. It just has to be someone under the age of 18. And it's kind of a crapshoot, and sometimes you serve a lot of meals, and sometimes you don't serve a lot of meals. Typically, through the course of the summer, you see the amount of meals being served go down. Now we're seeing kind of the opposite. We're seeing more demand, the amount of meals increasing pretty quickly in a short period of time.
You may wonder how this is all being paid for. Giusti says free school meals for certain low-income students are typically federally reimbursed. But during this unprecedented time, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has waived rules that deem some students ineligible, so families with kids under the age of 18 can easily get access to meals. In addition to federal funding, there are also a number of nonprofits helping to feed the many millions at risk of going hungry during this crisis.
We already know that 30 million children rely on school for their meals, so there's a significant portion of school-age population out there that could be going hungry. Organizations like Save the Children, No Kid Hungry, and others are working to ensure that school feeding programs continue. We're providing support to our partners on the ground in the way of grants to cover the cost of fuel so that they can run their bus routes and deliver food along the way.
That's Betsy Zorio, Vice President of U.S. Programs and Advocacy at Save the Children, a global nonprofit organization helping low-income kids and teens by providing food security, health, education, and more. Zorio says that rural areas in particular can be hard to help, and unfortunately, these areas often have many residents that are low-income to begin with.
In the rural communities where we work, unemployment is high to begin with, and families are struggling to begin with, and they tend to rely on those jobs that can be first to go during a recession. They may be driving a distance to work at a Denny's or a Cracker Barrel. They may have other sort of jobs that they do around town, and those are often the first jobs to dry up in an economy like this. And so we're concerned about how those families keep paying the bills, keep a roof over their children's head, and keep the lights on and food on the table to the extent that they can.
To meet this need, the organization is helping pay the fuel and labor needed to get these school meals delivered to small towns.
In some of the communities where we work, the children can live quite a distance from school, and that in and of itself presents a huge challenge to schools. They're trying to find creative ways to have buses drive their routes back into hills and hollers that they normally don't. But in order to ensure that those children are fed, they're trying to get around those challenges by delivering multiple meals at a time to a child so they don't have to keep running these routes. The particular challenge in rural communities that just don't have the resources, the food banks, the feeding programs that you would see in urban or suburban areas. Another challenge is for families who may not have a car or cannot afford the gas. And so if school districts are offering meals for pickup at a central location, it's difficult for those families to get there. Those families typically are saving their gas money to do maybe a once-a-month trip into town to pick up their groceries. And so to make daily trips to pick up meals is simply beyond their means.
In order to best serve these populations, Dan Giusti says that those providing assistance at different levels, from food service companies to nonprofits and school districts, need to get organized and communicate with each other on their efforts.
I've seen in some of the schools we're partnered with, you see this happening already where, again, meals are being prepared. Those meals technically are paid for what it's worth because they will get reimbursed by the government, but then they go to waste because for whatever reason, people went somewhere else to get a meal. It's always a challenge, too. School districts, again, resources are low. So the idea of being able to promote the fact that these meals are being served, where are they being served, where can you pick them up, when can you pick them up? So this is always a challenge for school districts. They might not necessarily have the capability to publish, to get this word out. So I would just advise people, if you're in a local area, to try to seek it out. And it seems like pretty much most school districts out there, big and small, are doing something to ensure kids are eating during this time.
Giusti adds that another big worry for schools and other essential industries such as food production and healthcare is possible labor shortages as more people get sick.
If one person in that kitchen gets sick, it's done. And we have to put everyone in quarantine and the kitchen gets shut down. So it's like operating in multiple kitchens with multiple small teams. So if one person gets sick, you're okay. Having people lined up behind them that can come into work and that are trained. I mean, all of these things need to be in place. And like I said, if you're a small school district of 2 or 3 schools and you're producing meals and one person gets sick, you might have to just stop making meals for 2 weeks. So this is a really tough situation.
So how is Brigade working with school districts to ensure the safety of people preparing these packed meals?
Limiting the amount of contact, limiting the amount of time that staff has to spend in the kitchens together, all working towards that. And I think it's imperative to work towards these things because, again, obviously our goal is to feed as many people as possible and do it as well as possible. But there are ways to do it that are smart, and there are ways to do it that inevitably are putting staff in harm's way. And the fact of the matter is a lot of the staff in school kitchens across the country are older in age. A lot of those folks do have underlying health conditions. Quite frankly, a lot of them shouldn't be working during this time. So we're trying to limit that as much as possible when we can.
One of the programs Brigade has recently put in place in some areas is the Meals on Wheels initiative that provides several days' worth of prepared breakfasts and lunches to families at designated stops.
Breakfast is primarily breakfast packs, which come in the form of essentially some kind of snack, a box cereal. We offer milk or an actual piece of whole fruit. Lunches are what we're serving that are frozen entrees, if you will. So we make them, we chill them quickly, freeze them, and then we deliver them with the buses with instructions to reheat. Obviously, food safety is paramount. Everything we've done has had to have been approved at this time through the local health department there. It's important that they're on board with exactly what we're doing, not just in terms of what's happening with the virus, but just general food safety in terms of delivering meals that will be reheated a couple of days later if need be.
Giusti says that by sticking to prepackaged, shelf-stable meals getting dropped off at multiple stops, it can help limit contact between employees and the public and also deter people from lining up in close proximity. If you're looking to get involved or possibly volunteer, Giusti says right now one of the best things you can do is stay home and instead make a monetary donation to your community's groups or schools.
You can donate directly to school food programs. So, school food programs have to operate as a nonprofit program where you can donate directly to them, which is extremely helpful, and a little bit of money goes a long way. Beyond that, there's a lot of folks reaching out to us about volunteering, and this is tough. Again, I think we've seen already in places there are too many volunteers. There are too many people in general. Obviously, limiting the amount of people is best. So as much as it's amazing that people want to volunteer and they want to help, of course, that's wonderful. But at the same time, in this whole situation, the less people, the better. And obviously, when you have limited people, you need people who kind of know the operation, who are trained to do these things. And that's not to say that some school districts out there can't use volunteers. Surely some of them can. So I don't want to discourage it entirely, but I would just encourage people, if they're interested in helping out, to inquire about either donating money or donating time, but just realizing that there's a good chance that they might not want any volunteers at that time because, again, it's just more people to manage, and that can be challenging and really not necessarily a good idea at this time.
To find out more about our guests, Dan Giusti and Betsy Zorio, as well as how you can help and where to find free school meals for kids under 18, visit viewpointsradio.org for links to additional resources. You can learn more about Brigade at chefsbrigade.com. That's spelled BRIGAID. Check out the nonprofit organization Save the Children at savethechildren.org. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. This segment was written by Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price.
Americans are taking sheltering in place seriously. During the week ending March 15th, when social distancing first started to take hold, produce sales were up 40%, and potato sales were up more than 72%. Columnist Produce by Pamela says that's because people are filling pantries for the long haul. Frank Muir is president and CEO of the Idaho Potato Commission.
Potatoes have a long shelf life, but as with any produce, it's dependent upon how they're stored. Potatoes should be stored in a cool, dark, dry place, but not in the refrigerator. The cold converts the starch to sugar, which creates a sweet flavor. Also, don't wash your potatoes before storing them, and don't store them near onions. Finally, if your potatoes sprout, that's okay. Just pick the sprouts off and your potatoes will be ready whenever you need them.
Staying in also means you'll need to cook with ingredients you already have on hand. You'll find recipes with that in mind at idahopotato.com. That's idahopotato.com.
With the threat of coronavirus, social distancing has become the new normal. But staying safe presents unique challenges for more than 5 million Americans living with Alzheimer's and more than 16 million family members and friends serving as caregivers.
Public health strategies aimed at limiting contact with others are nearly impossible for people living with Alzheimer's who rely on family caregivers and others every day.
Beth Kallmeyer is Vice President, Care and Support at the Alzheimer's Association.
For example, people living with Alzheimer's may forget to wash their hands or follow other safety precautions. Family caregivers need to be extra vigilant in helping individuals practice good hygiene.
Alzheimer's families also need to anticipate that current care, support, and communication options may change and make backup plans. And try your best to stay calm. People living with dementia take their cues from those around them. The Alzheimer's Association has more tips at alz.org, or caregivers can call its 24/7 helpline 800-272-3900.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows. And find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.
Coming up on Viewpoints.
Flying a drone over public space like a beach or a public square and using the drone's loudspeaker to tell people to go home.
The many uses of drones, from private flight to protecting public health. Then
they revealed to me that my father had not been my biological father, which is something that I had never remotely thought, known, entertained.
The hidden secrets uncovered through at-home DNA testing kits. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.